call to order this meeting, this Wednesday, January 8th meeting of the Rockport School Committee. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the December 18th meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read those? Okay, great. Any questions or edits? Great. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, now it's time for public comment. Do we have any public comment tonight? Don't everybody run up at the same time, okay. Correspondence, do we have any correspondence? Okay, how about donations?
We do not.
How about personnel?
We do have personnel update. So as you know, Anne Marie Lester was appointed to the Director of Student Services position. Elizabeth LaCroix has resigned from her position as elementary school paraprofessional. Michael Chanot has resigned from his position as elementary school paraprofessional, and Shelby Gale has resigned from her position as elementary school paraprofessional. Before anybody interprets that as a mass exodus of paraprofessionals, what's important to know is all three of those individuals have made some career opportunity growth and left the district for other opportunities, and in two cases staying within education or within social services. So we're very happy to have had them for as long as they were here, and we wish them the best of luck in their next position.
Okay, so tonight it doesn't look like there is a student representative in attendance, correct?
That looks correct, right?
Okay.
So for our update tonight on subcommittees, the policy subcommittee meeting did not occur as originally scheduled, but I believe the wellness committee did meet. So I think Ms. Altieri will give us an update on wellness committee instead.
Thank you. So the Health and Wellness Committee had our second meeting. It was great. We talked about sort of some goals and setting realistic goals for the year. And we had come up with, we are going to be having a community event, hopefully at all. And it will include sort of like a wellness fair, a community wellness fair where people come in and talk about different types of wellness, as well as a component that's sort of like a play component. And so we're going to try to be pairing those two things together. It will hopefully include some students to help with the planning of that. Amanda King is looking into that. And it will happen in the spring, but sort of the idea of it is to bring people into the schools, kids and families, but also other people from within the community. And I thought that was, it kind of aligns with not only school committee's goals, but sort of the district vision and where we're going. And someone even said, oh, we can put it in that new newsletter that we're sending out. So that was really exciting, and more to come on that.
That's great.
Yeah, so we have an update on RESA contract negotiations. So I am really proud to tell you that the RESA, Rockport Educational Support Staff Association, has ratified the offer that was on the table. And so tonight, after this update, we'll be asking for the school committee to vote in approval of that new contract. Just a couple quick things to go over with this. I would like to thank Chair Kathy Riley and Assistant Chair Nicole Altieri for sitting side by side with me on the school committee's representation. Also on the negotiating team for RESA, Michelle Elwell, co-chairperson Janelle Beaton, also co-chairperson Nikki Gale, president of RESA, and RESA members Amy D'Antonio, Laura Wheeler, Rosanna Spessi, Allison Chalmers, and Patty Watson. Big thank you to that particular group of people. Very collaborative negotiations, really professional, kept putting the interest of the district and the entire unit at the forefront of the conversation. I think what makes it interesting for the people in the public that don't always understand the way some unions are made up, this particular group has 4 subgroups within it, as the school committee knows. And so when you're negotiating, you're not just negotiating on behalf of one particular subgroup or the one work group that you're a member of. You really have to be pretty broad-based and pay attention to the entire will and need of the group. And I think they did a really nice job working with the school committee on that aspect. So in your drive is the entire proposal. There's a financial package proposal in there. There's a language proposal in there, and there are 3 updated evaluation forms, one for paraprofessionals, one for custodial and maintenance, and the other for administrative assistants and clerks. So you'll see all of those documents also attached to this. Some of the highlights, as some of you already know, is there's an updated salary grid that provides all members of RESA with what MIT is calling a living wage adjustment. So minimally, next year, every member of the unit will make a minimum of $28 an hour. It's a substantial increase. The school committee, on behalf of the school committee, Nicole and Kathy, and I know they've been in conversation with all of you, had a really good conversation about if you work for the Rockport Public Schools, we want to ensure that people are making a living wage and that they're respected through the salary and that they feel like this is a place that they could make a living and stay for a long period of time. We have many, many employees in this bargaining unit that have spent 15, 20, 30 years here, and they're dedicated to us and our students and our families, and it's important that the new contract reflects that. There were some adjustments in language around workday, around allowances related to some of the benefits that come with the contract, and I think other than that, it was a lot of cleanup around titles, names of holidays, and some of the smaller stuff that, every 3 years you do a new contract and it's iteration after iteration, and there's just, it seems like some of it is copy paste without a lot of cleanup sometimes. So I thank Amanda Ogier ahead of time because she has the awesome job of taking the old contract and turning it into a new contract and cleaning all of this language up. So thank you to Amanda for doing the work behind the scenes on that. So at this time, Madam Chair, I'd just be looking for a motion to accept you would be looking for a motion to accept the contract as presented.
Great, okay. So do I have a motion to approve the RESA contract offer as tentatively agreed upon by both parties and ratified by RESA?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. That's great news.
Thank you.
Okay.
So tonight, we're going to have our Director of Student Services, Anne-Marie Lester, come up and give us a presentation on preschool tuition. While Anne-Marie sets up and while I switch the slide deck, this was another one of many conversations that Anne-Marie and I had as she transitioned to the new position, as we're trying to become fiscally responsible and make as many budgetary decisions that are in the best interest of the school district. One of them was to really take a close look at our tuition structure at the preschool. So I'm going to have Anne-Marie give you an update on this, and then hopefully we can have a solid discussion and potentially a motion at the end. So I will turn it
Good
over to you.
evening, everyone. I feel like I'm becoming a regular. So Anne-Marie Lester, Director of Student Services. Tonight I'm here to talk about a proposal for our integrated preschool tuition. As you know, the district is responsible for educating students 3 to 22. So we're talking about the youngest age group tonight. Our preschool program debuted in 2006, 2007, and at the time it was run by North Shore Consortium. And it was developed to create an opportunity for students to learn and grow in an inclusive, diverse environment. The integrated preschool serves children, and Tasha, I'm just going to say up front, if I misspeak, I apologize. Tasha is one of our veteran teachers, preschool. Serves children between the ages of 3 and 5 who require specially designed instruction due to a disability. Typically developing children, or typically developed children, serve as mentors and model peers in that program. And our preschool team is an all-inclusive team with specialized early childhood experience, but there's also a team that is composed of speech and language, OT, so occupational therapists, physical therapists, counselors, so they all work together to educate those students. So that's just a quick little background. Our integrated model, we created 2 classrooms in 2017, and at that time, this structure that we currently have was approved. as was the current tuition. So after doing some digging and some research, this model and the tuition has been the same since then. Rockport has mentor students or peers, however, I don't want to misuse the word, so we'll use mentor for tonight. They have 3 options. They can attend Monday through Friday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Tuesday and Thursday. North Shore models are very similar. Gloucester has half-day options, but most of the other preschools in neighboring districts are full-time, but also have the option of 5 days, 3 days, or 2 days. Okay. So if we look at the expenses for FY25, we have 2 lead teachers, the cost of $153,575. $6,500 of that money is funded through a grant. So the total for the teachers is, as noted, $147.75. There are currently 4 paraprofessionals in that program. I did not, and I'm going to be honest, I did not pull their individual contracts, but the approximate amount that's been budgeted is at $120,000, so approximately $30,000 each. In our budget annually, they have a supplies and materials budget of $3,000 that does get supplemented through the grant as well, so they have the opportunity to purchase other things that they require, technology, materials, that kind of thing through the grant. So the total expenses that we spend, or we will spend, this current year is $270,075. The program has the capacity for 15 students total, so not mentor students, that's incorrect, so just note that, but it's 15. And then the mentor students are split, so it's like 8 and 8. So this year, I think what's very difficult, it's very difficult to predict the number of students that we will have. As noted here on the slide, we had 2 students that registered that did not attend, and then we had 1 move to Gloucester in November, and due to, they have to be a resident of Rockport, so they were no longer eligible for the program, so they had to transfer to a different program. We do often, what I'm finding this year is there are students who come for 2 days or register for 2 days and then want to change it to 3 or register for 3 and want to register, come for 5. And that's always, if we have availability, that's always sort of a group discussion on what makes the most sense, but that is an option. So we do have some flexibility within the year. That total amount, other than the grant piece, is funded through the student services budget. So just to be clear, it's allocated annually through the budget. I just want you to also, back on the last slide, Sarah, thank you. It just shows you the tuition that's come in for this year. So we have 10 students who come 5 days a week, and they bring in $50,985. Then we have 2 mentor students who do 2 days, and then 3 that do 3. So we bring in $62,570 for tuition. We did, after sort of collecting the data from sort of the expenses and what we're bringing in, we also looked at comparison. So we looked at other North Shore integrated preschools. So we looked at Gloucester, Ipswich, Manchester, Essex, Hamilton, Wenham, Peabody, Marblehead, and Beverly, and looked at sort of where we fall as the lowest, what is the highest per day tuition, and then the average comes out at $42. So we are significantly below the average. And we thought it was also important to look at private preschools because that is an option for people. And people that send their children to private preschools pay approximately $62.50 per day. So we looked at local Rockport and Gloucester preschools. So that gives you an idea of sort of what people are paying around the area. In order to create an easy monthly payment, this is how it's broken down for us in Rockport. So if you come 2 full days, which is 77 days, the monthly expense is $198. And then you can see how $297 for 3 and then $495. What we're proposing is to raise the daily rate to $40 per day, which gets us to the $308 for 2 days a month. If you come 3 days, it's $442, and then $720 if you're coming 5 days a week. So then finally, we sort of plugged those numbers in to look at sort of where we would be. And due to teacher and paraprofessional contracts, those salaries go up, which is the case in all departments. Even if we reduce to 3 paraprofessionals, the cost is still for 3 paras, $111,000. Supplies and materials doesn't change. Even going up to $40 a day, the differential, if you can see, it's $186,590, and we're only closing the gap by $20,000 as an estimate. And as you know, the calculations are based on potential spots, and I think 40 seems like a tremendous jump, but in comparison to sort of local, what other people are paying, it's not. And unfortunately, it doesn't give us it doesn't close the gap as much as we had hoped before we did all the math. But it does help, especially where we're cutting in so many areas. So that's sort of the rationale behind the proposal.
So before we open it up for discussion, I think when we started on this conversation, I think both of us anticipated that we would see, we would see a more substantial gap closure. But the reality is we were so much lower than the average. And we do think we need to be respectful of the community because you're already, if you look back a slide, you are talking about, a substantial jump from what they were paying to what they will be paying, particularly if they're a second-year family or third-year family. So out of respect for that jump, we'd like to take a vote tonight, make decisions, because I know the preschool is looking to open enrollment as soon as we can and get some people in. I think the other conversation is where do we believe as a school committee we want to fall long-term and what's reasonable. I don't know that we have to compare ourselves to private preschools who are for-profit organizations. I do think to compare us to the local public schools is the smart way to do it. And again, if this move gains us, $25,000, $30,000, $35,000, wherever it falls when we're finally done with this work, based on how many kids come in, that's the equivalent of 1 paraprofessional. This, to me, is worth having a conversation about, so that if the budget remains tight, we're not in another position before now and the 5th or before now and the town meeting to have another conversation about personnel. So I do support the move to $40, but I really respectfully need to hear the will of the committee and your understanding of the community with this kind of move. And it's been a long time since the school committee and the district has even had a conversation around this. We probably should have been doing it incrementally, just like everything else we should have been doing. And so we're just trying to get caught up at this point. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for throwing it together as quickly as you
You're
did.
welcome.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay. In my other life, I work for early intervention, so I work in transitioning kids into preschools all over the North Shore, public preschools. So I just have thoughts running through my head as you're discussing this. I think one would be, do you anticipate the increased cost resulting in decreased enrollment, or are we not sure? And is that something that we're maybe looking at and reviewing year to year? And then along with that, is there a ratio that you need to keep mentor students to students receiving special education services?
So it's 8 to 7, typically. I shouldn't. I know it's 8 to 7. But I think the bigger 8 mentors to 7. I think the fear is that if you daily, it doesn't seem like a big difference, but monthly, if you're budgeting, that does seem like a difference, especially if you have a current 3-year-old and then next year you'll have a 4-year-old. I do think that that's, however, I kept looking through and looking what the alternatives would be for families. And, you know, the Y is the most practical, reasonable, because it's on a sliding scale. It's income-based. But all of the private preschools are significantly more expensive, but that is a concern.
So that was just one thing, just
Yeah.
like that just crossed my mind. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't. The other thing is,
If you don't mind me responding to
no,
that one
go
first,
ahead.
I think what's hard, because I think we had talked about like some, you know, when you make some changes, public and private sector, you'll send out surveys and you'll do user group information, and we are the only public preschool in the community, and so I think what's difficult is to comp us off the other preschools seems to make sense, and to recognize that we can't continue to stay at the $27, $28. And so if you said, let's split it halfway, similar to us making personnel decisions, and how I've said too, I don't want to mess with professionals' lives and make some decisions this year, and then the following year cut that person a second year. I feel similar about messing with families' budgets. I would rather say to a family, you know, we know we're making this change, as opposed to make a small change, find ourselves in a situation where we come back to you in another year with the same exact parent group and say, well, now we're changing it again. I just think, now you could have a different argument and say that's easier on families incrementally, and I absolutely would love to hear that argument as well. But I'm sharing with you how our conversation has gone so far.
Can I say one more thing, Amy? Before, I'm sorry. So I wonder what's easier on families is to have an incremental change over a couple of years. And I also know that families who are having a tough time financially can use vouchers at private preschools, and I don't believe we have that option. So I wonder about doing it in stages. The other thing I had a question about was, it was my understanding that the preschool tuitions go into the special education, why am I blanking, June?
The special education reserve.
Stabilization fund, the reserve. And
The
so it's
reserve.
not like, do we expect it to be a self-funded program through tuitions?
No, because
or
we're
are we
responsible for educating our children,
through
3 to
for the mentor
5-year-olds, our
kids.
non-mentor students.
Yes.
We're responsible for them, fully. What the money, when this was initially set up, it went into, and we also got the creation of a special ed reserve, which we didn't have before. And that helps replenish it. That isn't the only, also the town is contributing into that reserve as well. So this is a small portion of that. It doesn't go to offset the immediate budget. We will be responsible for the full 270 or 288 in your budget, in our budget creations that you vote on.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, because I kind of thought that was the case, and I definitely agree that we're at a low. We're obviously the lowest, but I think, I don't know, I think we also provide a service to the community and have a really good reputation for peers, and it's also a funnel for young kids to come into our district. So I think it serves this dual purpose, right? We don't want to be financially irresponsible, but we also have this wonderful program that brings young children into our district. So balancing those two, I don't know.
Would you please go back to the slide that showed us the averages, the average costs? When I see the spread on North Shore is $27.50 to $72, and we're using an average, I don't want to ask you to go back and do these numbers, but sometimes we use a median rather than an average if we have an outlier like $72. I don't know if it would have made a difference if we had done
If
that.
we did it that way, it was $38.
Thank you. So I really appreciate that. The other thing, I just want to make sure I understand. If we raise the tuition for these families, the total net gain to the special education reserve is a whopping $20,000. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so I think about families with 3-year-olds and how challenging it might already be to live in a community with a high price of living, and how challenging it is to make ends meet. And I think about the size of our budget and how much we want to support our families and our teachers and do what's best for students. And I really do wonder, I know it can feel like we're coming back and coming back when we do this incrementally, but I do wonder if families would appreciate an incremental increase so that they can make this adjustment in smaller bits and pieces. I don't know how many families we have who might have 2 children coming to preschool next year who would have a double hit. And I don't know any of this. I just think about how hard you're working when you have children this age. And there's this old expression about, is the juice worth the squeeze? And the squeeze is going to be felt by families with small children who are
And
probably
just to-
working real
just
hard right now.
For transparency purposes, the 40, it's the higher end of what we obviously would propose, right?
Yeah.
The 40 is what got us that 20. So we had played with the numbers, $37.50, $35, and it all didn't seem to make a difference, right, in the big picture. So that's sort of what drove us to the top. I have the same concerns, but, I hear you.
And we also didn't feel like we felt like your conversation about the averages, I'm fully in agreement, but at the time when we were working with the average, the conversation was, let's make sure we're not anywhere beyond the average, because we felt like that was a pretty egregious move too. So, but I think to talk about the median, I think to talk about incremental, I'm curious what other people think.
So, I mean, my first thoughts are the same, balancing that, that increased percentage to the amount closing the gap. But kind of my big idea is thinking about our budget process in general. And we use this idea of zero-based budgeting. And to me, that sort of means we need to do what we need to do every year. And if we haven't raised these for 10 years or so,
2018.
it seems like that's something that we should have been looking at doing and haven't. And now I think it kind of aligns with what we're doing with our budgeting process right now. So I'm kind of, even though it is a large increase, it seems to align better with what we're doing with the zero-based budgeting on a year-to-year basis. I guess one thing I would maybe like to know is if it was incremental, would we do it on a year-to-year basis going forward, or would it be every other year or once every 3 years? What are your thoughts about if it was incremental, how often it would change?
I think that's part of the reason we're coming to you tonight. I think when it's this kind of a shift, particularly a tuition model in a public school district, I think respectfully it has to be a school committee conversation. And right now we haven't had a discussion of what that would look like. We wanted to start it here. For example, if you said tonight, listen, we understand it might make sense to start the adjustment. Let's look at the median and let's maybe start with that number as opposed to something else. Or I'm just say if we have other options there, then we could come back as a committee again with a second conversation once the preschool runs and have a very thorough conversation about we're going to look at this over an every other year. Right. So we'll review tuition every other year and put a real plan in place that makes it really clear for the community. So if I have kids in town, I know that every other year there might be some kind of adjustment. My suggestion would be maybe to slow it down in that direction.
I have all kinds of questions, and I'm so sorry because I'm so new to all this, but I wonder, for instance, whether it would be possible to have a conversation about what happens if we do nothing. What happens if we made half of this increase? We see what happens if we make the whole increase. I don't want to slow things down. I don't want to slow the budget process down. I don't want to make it difficult to enroll families because we don't set a price in a reasonable point of time. I do agree, Mark, that if we're serious about a zero-based budget, we need to be mindful, but I think I hear us saying, but this tuition comes nowhere close to covering the cost of this program. This is not zero-based budgeting here. This is trying to recover some money to put back in. Is that right, June?
It goes into the town sped reserve, which then we run a formula every the end of February, early March, of whether we're meeting objectives in different categories, and if we're short, it goes on the town meeting floor, and they give us that money in addition to what was voted the prior year.
Yeah,
So
these
they
dollars
help
are
us
not
out.
coming directly back into our
No,
budget to
we're-
offset the cost of
it's a
something.
mutual, it's a collaborative help
Yeah,
of
thank
this funding of this sped reserve through these tuitions and town tax dollars. And that's how the sped reserve is replenished.
Thank you.
So I had a similar thought to Amy about spreading it out over more time. I would also like to point out that I think our preschool program, my child went through it. I think it's worth it. I think it's a really amazing program. I mean, the things at the disposal of being inside the actual school building where there's a gymnasium and an art room and a music room and a library that these kids all get to experience in a preschool setting, I think is worth paying for, in my opinion. I know that it's not everyone has that ability to, budget for, but I have a hard time thinking that our preschool tuition shouldn't be on par with the surrounding preschools, especially where we do have the ability to offer all of those things on top of just a classroom.
Oh, sorry, Kathy. I would definitely agree that we provide a fantastic program, and it is worth, it is worth, and we need to be raising the tuition and looking at this much more often than every 10 years. But I do feel like it's a sort of a big blow to a family's budget all at once.
I think it's just helpful for families to understand that they should expect that things will increase. I think that's my point. I would say that I don't think that this program is worth this price or that we shouldn't increase tuition. I just think about making sure that people are on the same page and that they're not caught by surprise.
So I think one of the hardest things about this discussion for most of the people in this room is we're talking about tuition. And as public school staff and volunteers, we're not used to dealing with tuition. We don't like the idea of anybody not being able to participate because they can't afford it. And I know I know that's the norm, and I know it's worth it. And I know we've built an amazing program. So I think that's when it comes up. And then also, if we charged what we needed to charge to cover more, nobody would be able to attend. We'd be up in the $72 range or more. So it's hard to see anybody being not able to participate, and we're not even close to closing the gap. So I do, I am hearing here that a lot of people are feeling that it's a great program, worrying about the cost to the families, and maybe thinking about more of an incremental approach. What does that do to the schedule? What does that do to enrollment? What are the next steps? If we are reviewing like a more incremental of, yes, an increase for the next school year, but maybe more along the range of a 35 or a 38, more towards the median, something that, and then we let people know that it'll go up this year and maybe skip a year every other year so that you
Yes,
don't
so
get
the
caught.
enrollment is currently open. Screenings, we're hoping to have the entire process completed by April 1st. So we moved the timeline back a little bit because in all reality, families that are making decisions about where their kids are going to go to school, many of them, if it's the private route, those deposits have already been required. So we're trying to sort of back things, the date back a little bit so that, that we're sort of not the last resort sort of thing, but that we're sort of in the forefront of people's minds. So in terms of moving forward, I think it would, however whether the decision is to sort of hold, then we just need to publicize that what the tuitions will be for families, just as they do enrollment.
So I think the need for tonight is, and I'm just going to kind of summarize what I think I'm hearing, and if I'm wrong, somebody please tell me. I think what I'm hearing is, we could leave it at where it is, but you've heard our rationale for taking a look at it. We've talked about median versus mean, which is a real conversation that's worthwhile. We've talked about doing it incrementally or doing it all at once. We have to have a motion and a vote, because I'd like to be able to walk out of here tonight with the number so that can be publicized. In the literature or even on the website with the number, we could put the caveat that the school committee is currently reviewing its tuition practice, and by such and such a date, by the end of this school year or by the October 1st of next year, we'll have a tuition schedule that aligns. I think it would be pretty transparent, honestly, to let people know that there's, to your point, that something might be coming, and to your point, that it allows families to prep for it. We just, I don't want to throw. We've been so data driven as a team since I've been here that I want to make sure when somebody asks why did the school committee come to that number, with the help of administration, that there's a reason. So it's either the median, it's the mean, it didn't move. I think those are our three options, as opposed to picking a whole different number.
Are we saying that we can't come back in 2 weeks with one more conversation and vote in 2 weeks? You really need a vote tonight because you need to get moving. Is that right?
That's the hope. Yep.
And so, do I understand correctly that we could, what would we do? Would we enroll at this rate or at that rate, or would we not put a rate and say
We have to put a rate. What I'm hearing right now is we could either hold at $27.50 with some kind of language on the application that says the school committee is currently reviewing its tuition practices, and we'll put together for subsequent years a schedule and a timeline, or that caveat stays the same on all three versions, or we go to 38, or we go all the way to the 40.
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but if that's written, I wouldn't want people to think that we're reviewing it and it could change for September
Right,
of
I know, yeah,
25.
we'll be clear. I
As
get
long
it,
as
yeah.
we're clear that
Yeah.
it would be the
No, it'll be
following
clear.
second.
It'll be
I just
clear.
want to make sure that.
No.
Is there a possibility of us looking and saying, we would like doing the increase over 2 years and doing so half of the increase
Sure.
next year and half of
Sure.
the increase the year
Yeah,
after?
as long as you settle on, my suggestion would be to settle on one of those two numbers, I guess, right? The
Well,
30.
if you, so the 40, it's 27.50 now, so that's 12.50 a day or something more than it is right now. So is it possible to do?
45%. If you go to the 38, which is the median you said, that's just over 40%. So as a percentage, it's not a big difference.
Right.
Right.
So I
could
kind of
we-
wonder about making an increase as a percentage instead of a number. So, I mean, I know you said those were kind of the two ways to do it, the mean and the median, but you
Yeah.
could also do it as a 25% increase this year and another 25% increase next year. I don't know what those numbers come out to be.
I just think if I'm a parent, I think I just
Just
need,
want the
I need the
number.
Or
dollar.
if we split and we said 40 is the number that we're trying to get to.
Yep.
And we do
20.
12.50 this year and 12.50 next year increase. So you're doing it, you're just spreading it over 2 years and letting family know this increase is coming, but we're spreading it over
Yeah,
2 years.
6. Yeah,
Right, so I'm sorry, I can't, I'm a social worker. It's math.
yeah.
I don't know. That's just,
So
Okay, I like,
I guess I'm leaning towards, I mean, I'll be okay with what the group decides, although I'm leaning towards the idea of just picking the median, the 38, and going with 38 for this year and saying every other year we're going to review it and see where that falls. That would be my inclination. But if you want to spread it over 2 years, as long as we know that that's the plan, I'd be okay with that as well. if you
And
decide.
38 was the median? Is that correct? Thank you.
that sort of helps with that random 72 out there, as well.
it just still feels like a big, so it's 40% increase versus 48%. So I guess, is that right? 40 versus 48?
it's still a good sized bump, but it's been low for so long that it might just be the best option.
A $10 a day bump for somebody who goes 5 days a week is $200 a month. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
Somebody needs to make a motion, I guess.
Okay.
And you can, so I know, this is not,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So, yeah, so this is, well, it's not, this is not typically how we get to consensus, but this is more normed sometimes in other places. So how I've experienced, right? How I've experienced this is someone's gonna have to make a motion. We are gonna have to vote. It might be one of those situations where we don't have a 5-0 vote, and if it's 2-3 in the other direction, someone else has to make another motion. That's kind of where we are. And even if this doesn't feel like the cleanest conversation we've had, it actually is super helpful.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I'm learning in real time on camera is, this should be if in fact we put in an every other year thing, there should be a 2-meeting process. So you have time to look at, I understand that. And I want to recognize that in front of you all, and I want you to recognize that, like, we are still just trying to get caught up a little bit. And so we apologize for that. And I think if we're thoughtful about it tonight, we'll be more thoughtful about it once it's in place systemically.
I think an incremental, I can support an incremental increase, and I can support getting all the way to the average in 2 years. I think that when we know the mean is 38, and I don't mean to split hairs, but I think that $72 might throw things off just a little bit. So I get that we need to move the tuition up, and that the program is valuable and it's worth it. I think people need some warning that it's coming. I think it's January. People's first payment is due in September. So that there are 5 or 6 months to get ready. I just think in the interest of not catching people by surprise, it would be great if we did this over 2 years. Perhaps we would go to the mean this first year and go to the average the second year. I don't know. I don't know how high you want it to go in 2 years. But I would, if nobody else supports an incremental shift, I will not stand in the way. But I think if I had a 3-year-old, I'd appreciate at least even if it's symbolic, even if it isn't all that much money, just the notion that we understand and we'd like to do this in 2 steps, and then for people to understand every 2 years, or maybe even every year, this number has to get looked at, and people have to understand we won't go 7 years again and not look at a budget. We won't go, we don't operate that way anymore. So
And I'm thinking about what Mark said, because the 40%, the $40 is a 48% increase. So I'm thinking about what Mark said about using a percentage, and would it make sense to do like a 25% increase this year and a 25% increase next year, and that gets us to.
So I know we're on camera and this is public, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think using percentages in this kind of a story is actually worse.
harder.
I think if you said 48%, everybody rounds up to 50, and if you told me you were hiking any of my bills in my house up by 50%, I'd
Okay.
freak. Whether it was a $10 bill or a $100 bill, I just think use the numbers. We're in this community. We're
Right.
used to the daily rate.
Yep.
Let's
I'll be brave and make a motion, I guess.
pick the daily rate and then pick a daily rate and decide if you want to get there in 1 year or 2 years. And I think that would be the cleanest way for us
So
to manage
if
it.
we go with that idea too, if we say we want to get up to the median of $38 over 2 years, that's $10.50 increase. So if we did split that and said $5.25 this year increase, $5.25 next year, and then every 2 years we look at raising that.
I'd go every year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's every year,
I think the way
Right.
things are financially, we would look at this every year the way we would look at it, the rest of the budget every year.
But I'm just saying, let's make a motion. I would
would-
support making a motion of increasing it, the $5.25 this year.
So I was gonna
Yeah.
make them, I don't know, and we can disagree with this. I was thinking to get to the 40, and to split it in half, because the
Gets us to
40 is what
38.
Anne Marie and Mark had kind of
Say that
got
again,
to.
I'm
So I'd like to make a motion that we increase the preschool tuition this year by $6.25, and we increase it next year by $6.25 for full time. And then we review preschool tuition yearly thereafter.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Anne Marie, and I apologize to the school committee for setting up a messy conversation, and I will clean it up in the future. Yeah,
And I just want to clarify, I wasn't trying to imply that anybody didn't find value in our preschool. I just wanted to make sure
oh,
that
you were clear. No, we got
how
it.
incredible it was.
I think a two-part conversation is really, really great when things are at all hard, because we can hash it out and then people can run back and work on it, and then we can come back and it's easy. Yeah. Easier. Well, this is not easy. None of this is easy. Thank you.
Speaking of not easy, we will shift to continuation of the budget development. So you have an updated slide deck. I will go through it tonight. I apologize to people who keep seeing the same slides, but they're there for people who have never seen it. So this is our timeline that we're working with. We're shooting for a public presentation of the final proposed school budget book and a vote from the school committee on the 5th. Between the 6th and the 5th, we're literally going to take our financial roadshow out, meet with the board, the select board, the FinCom, and do a lot of community engagement around the budget in order to get ready for the Rockport Springtown meeting on April 5th. Just a reminder that we're here for our students, and this budget represents that one group that we're responsible for taking care of that does not have a voice politically, and so we just take that all seriously. And just a reminder again that we are following a zero-based budget process, which means we didn't roll the budget forward. We took a really good look at the budget and made strategic decisions, as you'll see on the first reduction slide, where we had already made some reductions in real time based on the current business of the district. And again, the operating budget is what we're talking about in this particular budget cycle. We just had a meeting, yes, all my days are blurring together, Monday, we just had a capital improvement planning committee meeting. The technology department and the school department presented to the committee on your behalf. We presented the asks that we had put together, and there was we were allowed to put together an additional ask that I will bring back to you if and when it goes through, related to music department equipment, which was a really nice position to be put in by the town administrator and the planning committee. So we appreciate them supporting the needs of our music department at the nth hour. And again, just understanding that the town contribution, is around 75% or so. We also have the school reserves, which we talked about. We do have user fees. We understand that it's public education, and we would love to live in a world where there's no such thing, but they do exist. And then we rely heavily, in some cases, on grants, federal and state. And you'll see in this year's budget book, you'll see some updated information around how aggressive we're trying to be around getting as many grant opportunities as possible. And our goal continues to try to be as fiscally responsible as possible while still supporting the growth and achievement of our students. And it is a difficult task. Many school districts are trying to be what we're calling fiscally responsible, and they're not really able to move the district forward. And I'm proud of the fact that we continue to keep that at the forefront. And my hope is that the community recognizes that and the importance of that work. So at our last school committee meeting, we had presented an original preliminary overview with these notes on the side. So I won't go through it again, but that had originally showed the budget gap of just over $1 million with a 5.97% increase over last year's overall budget ask. This is your updated development sheet. So I'm going to slow down and take us through this for a few minutes just so you understand what we're looking at. So the original gap as presented at our last meeting was just over $1 million. The leadership team came back together and kind of sharpened our pencils, took a look at a little more of the business of what we needed to do to move the district forward. As the committee knows, we've had conversations from the first meeting when Anne Marie was here, and when we've talked about special ed and the needs of the district. We've talked a little bit about either partnering with the consortium or trying to create our own programming. And in a perfect world, I would say we're hopefully long-term plan would be to do both. Right now, Anne Marie has been working hard on putting together what we're calling the ILP, an intensive learning program. That would focus on a specific age bracket of elementary students, grades 1 to 3-ish. Am I guessing correctly? K to 2, so I was close. I can pay more attention, sorry. So K to 2, and we are looking at hiring a teacher for that program, and then having a supply line, and so that roughly would run us around $68,000. While that is an increase, it eventually turns into a cost savings or a cost avoidance, depending how it plays out. And either of those two would be a valuable win for students and families, and it would be a valuable win for our budget. Again, thank you to Anne Marie and to special ed team for taking a look at this. We are pretty confident right now that this is going to come to fruition, and there's a lot of work and moving parts. The second thing we're looking at is an additional maintenance position. As we talk about the health and wellness of our aging buildings, we moved to an electronic ticket system this year to help us track the work and to help us track the needs of the building. And as I continue to have conversations with Kirk Keating, and as the principals continue to have conversations with Kirk Keating about the needs, everything from lowering the height of an elementary school desk to fixing a roof that we didn't know needed to be fixed. We're running the gamut for what maintenance looks like in this particular district. So we recognize that we just don't have the actual human capacity to keep up, believe it or not, with the work of buildings and grounds. Historically, it's my understanding that the position had originally, many years ago, there was a hope to add the position at a different price point and potentially even to add a second position at that exact same time. Neither of those things came to fruition for a lot of reasons. So our proposal is that we are looking to add another maintenance position, and we're talking about a skilled laborer. Someone with one or more licenses, so that could be anything from a general contractor to a plumber, an electrician, or anywhere in between, any HVAC certifications, that kind of stuff. Somebody who has a high-end skilled labor background who will be able to really give us the support that we feel like we need. I've had conversations with Mitch Vieira, our town administrator, about this. And have looked at his infrastructure in the DPW and how many people he can deploy to the rest of the town's buildings. And I have to, remind ourselves that these are the town's buildings. They're not the school's department-owned buildings. And so this is a conversation that he understands is going to have here, and it's going to be embedded in our budget. And I just wanted him to know that we're trying to make headway on taking care of the town's buildings through our operating budget, so to speak. So that's in here. And then there's a small $1,400 benefit that as we calculated the budget, it came out of the new RESA agreement that we wanted to, that just didn't get captured in the original math. So we have captured it appropriately this time. So that creates an updated gap of $1,199,854. We had original reductions of $1 million. We had closed the gap reductions of $874, all presented at the last meeting, which are still outlined on slides 12 and 13 with more detail. So I will go through the added detail tonight so you can see the difference between the last meeting and this meeting. And then you'll see an additional slide of additional non-HR reductions of $265,281 that June has worked really hard to put together for us and avoid more HR situations. Those are outlined on slide 14. And I'm happy to tell you, as strange as the choice of words might be there, that puts us at a gap of only $60,539 in about a month and a half. That's a lot of hard work on a lot of people's part to get us there. June and I are going to have conversations that we can also have tonight on how best to address that $60,000, but in the big scheme of $17 million, we're really not too concerned about it at this point. So this first slide is the exact same slide. These are the zero-based budgeting reductions that had occurred after town meeting, which were already eliminated from the budget rollover. This is the 7 FTEs of teachers, which with more detail. What I want to make sure people know tonight is that any employee who is losing a position as a result of the RIF process, and any employee who is being reassigned to a different position as a result of the RIF process has been personally spoken to by administration, and those conversations obviously were difficult for all players involved. All accounts, they were strong, professional, emotional conversations. But again, I thank all of the people who've been involved on both ends of those conversations for how they've handled those couple of difficult days to get here. So the end result, as we talked about earlier, is the current enrollment projections show us that we need to get down to 2 teachers, two sections of students in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So as a result, this is now the new middle school configuration that's being proposed. Conversations have been had with employees about this shift. There was a lot of collaboration with the current middle school team about what the model could and couldn't look like to meet the best needs of our kids. And the result is that we will have 4 teachers next year assigned to 6th grade. So there's no change in the amount of teachers in that grade, but what happens is the kids will only be divided into 2 classroom groups, and they will cycle through those 4 teachers. Those teachers will be content specific. That was very, very important to the leadership team and to the teachers, actually, that we had teachers who were in their college area, their passion area, their licensure area. And that we felt that from 6th grade on that was an important model to maintain. So you had a math professional and an ELA professional, et cetera, all the way through. So they will teach 2 sections. They will then have their win block and their advisory block, and then those 4 teachers will also teach in their content area at the high school. And that's how those 4 teachers wind up full-time. As Principal Rose and I talk about, staffing in this way in a 6 to 12 school kind of looks like a house of cards sometimes. We are very dependent upon licensure, college background, and experience. So this model works, quite honestly, because we have dare I say, the right people in positions with licensure in these areas, with the skill sets. And that when Principal Rose and I had these conversations, the people who will be taking on these roles, we are confident that it's going to be really value added at the high school. They're people who could come in and write brand new curriculum, put together new electives, take over MCAS tested subject areas that are important to us, and really help us prep college and career. So this couldn't be done if we didn't have the exact players and the right licensure, and we are fortunate to be able to do that. The second team will also be a 4-person team, but there will be a 7th and 8th grade looping team. So they'll have 2 groups of 7th graders, 2 groups of 8th graders. So if you're a child in 7th grade next year, you'll come in and you'll start in 7th grade with those 4 teachers, and you'll come back in 8th grade with the same 4 teachers. There's a lot of literature on the looping model that makes a lot of sense, everything from relationship building to classroom management to content consistency. And most of that research outweighs the perceived negatives that could come out of human relationships. So we are proud to take that on, and those teachers are aware that that's the model as well. The 7 reductions are basically happening. 1, there's a retirement in the district, so we're going to handle that through attrition, which is always the best way to handle reduction in force. And then there are 6 other teachers who have already had difficult conversations with Principal Rose. They are RMHS core teachers. What that means is they are currently teachers who are teaching one of those 4 major core subjects: English, math, science, or social studies. All done through the seniority process. And so that's how we wind up with the 7 FTE reduction, and that's the change in the model at the middle school. So I'll pause there because that's a lot of information, and if anybody has questions about either the model, the reduction, or the amounts, I'll take those. And if it's clear, I'll just keep moving. Good. Okay. So the next one, which was on the slide the last time, this is the exact same slide, so I won't belabor the point, but was a reduction of 6 curriculum coordinator positions, which are stipended positions, shifting from the model on the left-hand side to the model on the right-hand side. And so a lot of factors went into this. One, less professional staff in each department, less students, and ultimately the other thing is if you look at the cost savings there at a little over $35,000, that's basically one more paraprofessional position. And so by making this shift, not only are there curricular reasons for doing it based on numbers, but it also allows us to avoid making another $35,000 reduction of a person, of a total person. So the next one shows you a reduction of 5 paraprofessionals, and I think we had a short conversation about this at our last meeting. But again, as we're looking at developing special ed programs, redeploying students, we have special ed facilitators working with Anne Marie and working with liaisons on how we are developing service grids in our IEPs to ensure that we're meeting the needs of kids, but not putting us in a position where we're creating HR needs that aren't really driven by the needs of students. Let's put it that way. So all of that work is happening behind the scenes this year. And the result is that we do believe that we could be 5 paraprofessionals lighter. And what we have said internally as many times as we can is, as we know, our charge is to take care of all students. If you ever find yourself during any school year with a need to make a hire in special ed because it's dictated by the needs of the child, then we clearly make that hire. That's what the special ed reserve is there for. Or we chase other grant funds, or we redeploy human resources in a different way. So I don't want anybody to think that this means in any way that, somebody's child or a program that is currently benefiting from a paraprofessional is suddenly going to not benefit from a paraprofessional. We do believe that part of the right sizing of this department is to take a look at programming and to take a look at how we're deploying people.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep, go ahead.
Paraprofessionals. Does the 3 paraprofessionals who resign their positions have anything to do with this reduction, or is it very just specific to?
It's they happen to have job opportunities.
But I mean, I don't mean did they resign because of this?
No.
I meant, does the fact that there are 3 less paraprofessionals?
No, there aren't going to
now-
be 3 less paraprofessionals. Those are positions we need.
Okay.
Yeah. So I believe we're currently advertising and interviewing for those positions. Yeah. Thank you. And then the last one is a reduction of a full-time administrator. This is going to be achieved by, for the second year in a row, restructuring district leadership team and administration. So we're going to eliminate the current model, which includes a 1.0 RES assistant principal and special education facilitator, and a 1.0 RMHS special education facilitator. And we're going to restructure it and create a new position that is a 1.0 pre-K to 12 special ed facilitator. So it'll be the hierarchy now would be, or the flow chart would be Anne Marie, special ed facilitator, side by side with principals, and then liaisons. The data behind this shift, because it does sound like a large change to the district, the data behind this, as we've looked at it, and I'll use my own town as an example. I live in a town that has 2 middle schools of over 850 students each. And the typical model in those size schools still is to have 1 person in this role. If we had 4 walls instead of 8, we have 680-ish kids, less than 700 students. Our special ed percentage is on par. It's a little above state, but it's on par, generally speaking, with our comps in comparable districts. So we do believe that this is it can be an effective position with the right person in place. So this is a very careful advertisement. This is a careful hire. And we need someone that's going to partner with Anne Marie, principals, and the special ed liaisons to make sure, as we react to the special ed audit that we talked about a couple weeks ago, we're going to get a pretty heavy report of findings, we think, sometime in March. And we're going to use that no different than we use our strategy for district improvement to make long-term programmatic decisions around how we manage HR and programmatic development in our special ed department. So this allows us, to kind of streamline the leadership of that work and, make a reduction of over $115,000 at the same time. So thoughts or questions about that one? Good. This next page, this is, what was your phrase? Squeezing juice?
The juice worth the squeeze.
Is the juice worth the squeeze? I'm going to use that. I don't know if it applies here. It's fun to say. So here, I think the juice is worth the squeeze. June spent a lot of time locked behind her door with a calculator and scratch paper and a pencil, it looked like, really trying to figure out where in our originally proposed budget we could squeeze a little bit. And what needs to be understood is because we did zero-based budgeting and we didn't roll, in a majority of these lines, we had increased. We had increased because it was the needs of the district. And when you do zero-based budgeting, when she took a look at, for example, athletic equipment budget, when we're reducing from 30 to 28, that doesn't mean they're not getting an increase necessarily in some of these lines. They still are getting increases. If you look at last year's budget to this one, it's just we're not going to do the full requirement of zero-based budgeting as a result of this, which is why when we look at that $60,000 gap at the end, I don't want to put you on the spot, but she squeezed pretty hard and got 265 and change. Maybe there's 60 that trickles out of there. So I think I feel pretty confident about closing that gap at the end. But this is, if you have questions about anything on this list, I can go through it. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory, generally speaking.
How do you the bottom expense of from the consortium?
We might know that there are
There
some
are some tuition savings possibly informing by creating this intensive learning program that
Oh,
we will
okay.
be able to save tuitions and return students
back to the
the
district.
in-house.
We also could
and
be
that is the savings.
We could also be anticipating age outs
Okay.
in this model as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So that is the majority of the money, obviously.
Yep.
And
Yes.
But that's an example of creating something, a new program, actually in the end could potentially save money.
Do you know, we just talked about the integrated preschool, the tuitions, having not looked at those prices for the last 10 years. Do you know the last time we looked at the transportation costs for family and the athletic fees? Because
Yeah.
that might seem like another area
Yeah.
that those fees have been, kind of the same for many, many years.
So I'll give you the short answer tonight, and then we'll have a longer conversation. I think we're picking this particular fee structure first, and then I would like to come back to the school committee when we're not trying to build a budget and have a thoughtful conversation. Because I do believe it's operational and philosophical when you talk about fees in public education. We all know what happens if we have no fees to an operating budget or to the supply of everything from uniforms to band instruments, or tires for a bus, dare I say, But I think we have to have a real conversation with the school committee that's philosophical and operational around our fee structure. So I think after we build this budget cycle, what we'll probably do is take do a similar audit around the North Shore, and maybe a little further around what transportation fees are in our charge, what user fees look like for athletics, clubs and activity fees, those kind of things, charging students to come see their peers play athletic events, all of those practices that are becoming more and more normed in public education, in order to maintain programming and operations. So that's not as short as I thought it would be, but it's a short Branco answer. Any other thoughts on this one?
I think that's a great point. I think transparency is so important as costs go up. And I think it takes time to bring people together to have these conversations. Transparency takes time. It's easier just to go inside a black box and figure it out. But in the long run, of course, we'll do much better if we're transparent and people really truly understand if a fee goes up, why it goes up, and that they're not caught by surprise as that happens. But that's work. Yep. Thank you.
So on the last slide, you can now see the total reductions overall that include the reductions from zero-based budgeting. You can see the actual close the gap, and you can see that our remaining budget gap is just over $60,000. That first bullet is not a quick read to gloss over. This, as it stands, represents 0.09 increase in total growth. We're 0.09 away from level funded. I'm not sure I've ever heard that said in 30 years in public education, unless the organization was falling in the ground. And we're not falling in the ground, we're getting stronger and moving forward. So the taxpayers need to understand that is, and we all need to understand that is a fascinating reality to me. This also supports programmatic improvement and growth. There are no reductions to services. There's no reductions to programming. As a matter of fact, we anticipate increasing programming, potentially having new electives at a high school that we don't have this year, and continuing to expand our technology and STEM offerings. No programmatic reductions, and it, at this moment, does not draw upon the reserves, which again is a really, really important statement for the community to hear. So I thank everybody who's been part of the budget build so far. I thank you all for your questions and your thoughts around it. The hope is to come back in 2 more weeks to show you that remaining $60,000 is closed. And the one thing we haven't done at all is kind of the real glass full conversation. If you remember, every year in the budget book, we have that value added page where we really talk about the positive stuff that comes out of the budget as opposed to the reductions. So that leadership team and I will be putting that together for you as well, so we can have a positive conversation about, as a result of this difficult budget build, here's all the glass half full stuff that we're really proud of. So we'll be putting that work together for you in 2 weeks, and then present the full budget book on the 5th. The committee will have that a week ahead of time, as they have in the past, to really absorb, and then we'll slow down that night and do a full budget hearing with the full budget book. So that's it for me. Any final thoughts or questions around budget?
Yeah, this is not one of our favorite discussions at all. These changes are difficult changes to make. I mean, they affect our coworkers, our friends, our neighbors, but it ultimately serves the best interests of the constituency that we're bound to represent, our students. I wrote down things because I'm not a good off-the-cuff talker, but doing this does help ensure the consistent presence of Rockport Public Schools in the community and the highest quality education for all of our students. That's our end goal, is for the school to be here and to be good. Well, when we express our appreciation for all the good work that everybody involved has done, we say good work, nicely done. We're not blind to the results of all this good work. It has been a labor of love of sorts. It's been amazing for me to watch everybody come together and work on this, from the leadership team and the teachers themselves, to envision a new model for the middle high school, one that propels our students and our district forward. I'm very proud of the work that we've done, even though it was very hard. Thank you to everybody. If anybody else has any comments? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a need for for school committee discussion other than? Okay, great. Well, we do have a need for executive session tonight. We have a need for executive session to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. We will adjourn from the executive session and will not reconvene in open session. This requires a roll call. We'll start with you, Mark.
Lorenz, yes.
Altieri, yes.
Riley, yes?
Oaks, yes.
Delisi, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And then